Welcome to Get Over It, the consciousness transforming podcast for exceptional 21st century living. Folks, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking about Hermetic philosophy, and we're going to be speaking with Marlene Seven Bremner and talking about her new book, Hermetic Philosophy and Creative Alchemy. Folks, this is a subject that I am not that versed on, so she's going to be educating me as she is educating you, and there's truly a lot to learn. So if you're a Golden Dawn fan or anything in that area, this is the show for you. Now, the information shared on Get Over It uses intuitive and pragmatic insight to help you shift your consciousness to break through the blocks and release energy that is no longer needed. Yes, we're going to help you let go of the BS that's been holding you back. But you know, I always ask that question, are you truly ready to? And by the way, folks, BS is belief system. A bit about me for my new listeners, intuitive since birth. I'm a third generation intuitive with over 3 decades of experience supporting people to break through the blocks along their path. I'm a strategist for personal and professional transformation, revealing cutting edge information that enables you to prosper and thrive. I spent 25 successful years in corporate America as an executive sales professional, and I am the founder of Healing Visions Ministries and the Northern California Children's Education Network, a 501c3 nonprofit. I provide consultations and healings in all areas of life that heal the mind body spirit connection, allowing you to live your very best life. My clients tell me that I keep it real while providing them with accurate information to assist them along their journey as a spirit living a human existence. But they also say, if you really don't want to know, don't ask Monique. My background includes a doctorate in metaphysics, Reiki master teacher, ordained minister, and clinical hypnotherapist. So whether you are stressed, depressed, or possessed, I can help. To find out more about me and the services I offer, go to my website, and that's moniquechapman.com. And I invite you to like me on Facebook and follow me on LinkedIn. And folks, I am no longer on Twitter, so do find one of the other options. My guest today, Marlene Seven Bremner, is a self-taught oil painter, writer, and teacher who has spent more than 20 years exploring esoteric and spiritual traditions, including Hermeticism, alchemy, surrealism, symbolism, tarot, psychology, magic, astrology, shamanism, and mythology. She developed her career as an artist in the Pacific Northwest, and now she spends her time painting and writing in the New Mexico desert. And you can check her out at her website, and that's Marlene Bremner. No, it's not. It's Marlene7Bremner.com, and it's MarleneSevenBremner.com. Welcome, Seven.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you so much for having me. That was a
Oh,
lovely
it's
introduction.
Thank you. It's so great to have you on. As I said, to you before we even started the show, this is a subject that I, don't have a lot of knowledge about, but I am so curious about and truly, truly, truly want to learn. So I want to first start off with your name. Okay, your name is Marlene Seven Bremner.
Mhm.
Where did the seven come from?
Well, Seven was a chosen name, probably about 10 years ago or so, maybe longer. I don't remember. I was going through a big change in my life, and I'd always thought that the number seven would make a beautiful name. And I
Hmm.
appreciated that as a number, it's got this sort of neutrality to it. And it's not necessarily masculine or feminine, it's this neutral sound. And
Hmm.
when I was going through this big change, I intuitively felt like I needed a new vibration. I needed a new energy to help me move through this.
Hmm.
And I happened to be moving at the time. So I decided to start going by seven when I moved to this new town. And it really, really made a difference in how I felt within myself and
Hmm.
helped me to feel a little bit more in touch with my masculine side. Because I
Hmm.
feel like my given name, Marlena, which I really love, and it's a beautiful name, um, was just a little too like watery and soft at the time. So seven was slightly more masculine than that, even though it's neutral in itself. And it helped me tap into a different part of myself that I really, really needed at the time. And since then, it's just kind of stuck, and I really appreciate it. But clearly, the number seven has so much spiritual significance and has played a role in my life from a very young age, in many different ways. So it has a lot of meaning for me personally. And also, when I started learning about Hermeticism and about the seven spheres, that meaning became even more profound for me.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very, very deep. And folks, I want to be clear. When you go to her website, it's Marleneseven Bremner. And although it's Ene, it is pronounced Marlena.
Thank you.
And yeah, and it was interesting because in my book where keep track of everybody on the podcast, I wrote in Marlena, and then when I was preparing for the show this morning, I'm like, okay, you got to remember to say Marlene, not Marlena. Who knew I had it right all along? I love those little coincidences that the universe
Mhm.
throws our way. Now, how did you dive deep into and become familiar with Hermeticism and alchemy? What was the
Mm.
prevailing energy that sent you there?
Well, it's kind of a long and winding path, but I think my initial, like, real introduction to Hermetic ideas was when I was studying polarity therapy in my early 20s. And, I'd been interested in natural healing for a long time and decided that I wanted to go deeper with it. And I found a teacher when I was living in Olympia named Dr. Leslie Korn, and she became my one-on-one teacher and mentor in polarity therapy. And I studied for about 5 years. And this is a kind of a modern modality that was developed, I think, around the 40s or 50s by Dr. Randolph Stone. And
Hmm.
essentially, it just works with a person's life force energy to open and release blockages. And it works by the principle of polarity. So positive, neutral, and negative poles, using both hands on the body to move energy from one pole to another and open blockages that way. So
Hmm.
it's largely based in Ayurveda and also in Western osteopathic techniques, but a lot of the
Hmm.
principles underlying polarity therapy are Hermetic. And, Dr. Randall Stone writes about the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, and he writes about Hermetic principles. Um, and one of the main things that I would say that stands out in terms of that work is the principle of correspondence, which is that everything within us is reflected within the cosmos and within nature, and vice versa, as above, so below.
Hmm.
And that we can look outside of ourselves to nature, to the elements, to the cosmos and the planets to understand what's going on within us, and that there's celestial signatures within our energy bodies and within our physical bodies. So that was my introduction, I would say, to Hermetics, but
Hmm.
it wasn't for many years after that that I really became that I became that I was able to understand it in more depth through years of study and contemplation
Hmm.
and reading old alchemical texts, and then getting into the original Hermetic texts and that sort of thing. And that
Hmm.
developed alongside with my art. As I was teaching myself how to oil paint, I was studying alchemy and starting to think
Mm.
about Hermetic philosophy, and all of that was being integrated in my creative process. So
Ah,
that,
well, that's quite interesting because you were studying one thing, creating with the art, and folks, go to her website. You will see the art that she has created on the front page. There is a full color spread in the book of her art, and some black and whites. Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you wouldn't think that this was from a self-taught person. Although I don't know much about art, so maybe most
Mhm.
artists are self-taught. I don't know, but absolutely gorgeous. But you can feel the energy of the painting. I mean, as you're looking at it, is to me, it was like going to a museum and studying a piece of art, okay, and allowing the messages to flow through. So you created the book, you created the art. How did you apply the Hermetic and alchemical principles to your work as an artist?
Well, at first I went through a series of alchemical stages, and it was through my self-observation and transformation that I really integrated this information and was able to start writing about it and um, transmit it outside of myself. But I had been going through a very difficult time in my life. And this was when I was teaching myself how to oil paint. And I was also still in school for polarity. And I didn't really know how to help myself. I didn't know what to do. And it seemed
Mm-hmm.
like everything all the tools in my toolbox were just sort of like useless at that point. Nothing really seemed to work, like meditation, receiving body work, going on long walks, practicing yoga. All these things would actually trigger anxiety in me rather than help calm me down like they used to.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find a different way. And at the time, I had started reading Carl Jung's Psychology and Alchemy and another book of his called Alchemical Studies. And he has this very psychological lens on the alchemical art. And so that was my introduction to alchemy. And I began to understand that what I was going through, this difficult period and this darkness that I was dealing with, was actually part of a process. And in alchemy, the darkening is the first step in this stage, or these four stages of spiritual progression and evolution and
Mm-hmm.
transformation. So essentially, we begin with the shadow work. We begin with going within and facing those difficult aspects of ourselves that we don't necessarily want to look at, and going into those kind of uncomfortable places within ourselves. And so I
Mm-hmm.
realized that that was happening for me. And rather than fighting it and being afraid of it, I started to embrace it and also started to allow myself to express what I was feeling and these sort of dark emotions and things, express them through the creative process. And
Mm-hmm.
as this went on over time, I started to see things transform within myself and within the art that I was creating. And then over the years, I kind of was able to observe myself going through the four stages of the alchemical process. So from that dark blackening phase to the whitening, cleansing phase, and then to this kind of ripening yellowing phase, and the final rubedo, which is the completion of the work or the reddening. And, um, I realized going through all of that you don't just go through it once. This was sort of a big extreme experience for me, but since then I've gone through this process many times in many different ways and in many different areas of my life.
Mm-hmm.
That first experience was so powerful for me and so transformative. I was a completely different person when I came out on the other end of that. All of the self-doubt and fears and negativity and all of that had sort of been washed away and transformed into something new and
Mm-hmm.
into a new integrated awareness of something essential within me that was more eternal and solid. So,
Okay. No, go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, yeah, we can.
Okay, well, I was just thinking when you were talking about the um, four different stages, and then I thought about the planets because you incorporate the planets. Now you incorporate more than four, but you incorporate
Mhm.
the planets into your work. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Saturn was the darkness. So is there a direct correlation between step one and Saturn?
Yes, definitely. Saturn is very much associated with that first step in the alchemical process, which is called the nigredo or the blackening. And
Mm-hmm.
Saturn in general kind of has a bad rap as being kind of dark and evil. And I think it's really just because we tend to fear those things in our culture.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
But really, it's a necessary part of life. The death of things is necessary, and in order for things to be regenerated. And so that's a very core principle of alchemical philosophy is, there is no generation without putrefaction. We need that sort of death and disintegration. And
mm-hmm.
it's the same when it comes to our creative process, and it's the same when it comes to our spiritual process as well. That there are necessary times of rest and inertia and going within. And so, yeah, this is the first step in the alchemical process. And that's also why I put Saturn as the first planet in the planetary chapters. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
And an interesting correlation when it comes to our esoteric anatomy is that Saturn relates to the root chakra, which is at the base of our perineum. So it's our lowermost chakra, and it's what connects us with Earth and with our physicality. And that's the chakra where we deal with issues of our sense of safety and security and stability, and where we kind of deal with our issues with death and our fear of death and our mortality. So in the same sense that Saturn begins the process of alchemy, it's also the root chakra, which is kind of where we begin when we're working with our energy bodies.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next planet, which in the book, Jupiter. You call that the sovereign storm. Tell us more about that.
Well, Jupiter is the planet of expansion and growth and joviality and freedom and liberation. So where Saturn is kind of about restriction and limitation and discipline and form, Jupiter is really more about breaking through that into new possibilities. So this is also the next chakra as we're moving up. So it's the sacral chakra associated with the water element. So if we're looking at Saturn in terms of Earth and density, then this is a movement into a more fluid state of being, more emotional state of being. So once we kind of deal with these root chakra issues with going and facing the shadow and dealing with the darker aspects of ourselves, then we can begin to move into a more dreamy, fluid relationship with reality. And so in the alchemical process, this is kind of like the dissolution where we start to merge with our surroundings. We start to feel how everything outside of us is actually within us and looking at reality in a more symbolic way. So Jupiter is really about that breaking through limitations, opening up to new possibilities and tapping into our creative power. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the third one is Mars, but before we get to Mars, I want to ask a question about what you just said. You talked about the chakras that Saturn and Jupiter are in. Now, if we take that and we look at our birth chart, does that correlate to what's going on within our birth chart where Saturn and or Jupiter is placed? Or did that make sense?
I think so. Certainly. I think using our natal chart is a really excellent way to begin working with these energies. Because really, these 7 planets, the 7 traditional planets, are archetypal energies. And we can relate to them physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. There's so many different ways that they express in our lives. And looking at our birth chart, we can kind of see how these planetary spheres, which are called the fate spheres in the Hermetic philosophy, meaning they determine our fate. We see exactly how that fate is determined when we look at our natal chart. But if we look at our natal chart and we say, okay, this is how I am, my planet, this planet's here, this planet's there, and so I'm going to be this way and that way, that's a very limiting way to use the chart. And we can look at it rather as a way to overcome those limitations of fate and to transform the placements of our planets into their highest, most exalted expression.
Okay. So now let's talk about Mars. And Mars in the book, you say it's the flames of transformation.
Yes, yes. So Mars relates to fire and to passion and also anger and rage. And that can be, both positive and negative, obviously. And Mars is the warrior. So it's that part of us that wants to fight, that's very active and masculine and related to the fire element. So fire, of course, is absolutely necessary in any sort of alchemical work. And the way that I like to think about it is fire is really our intention and our attention. So it's this level of intensity that we apply through our intentionality with our practices and through the attention that we give these processes as they're unfolding within us, these transformative processes. So we can work with this sort of alchemy in any domain that we really want to. For me, it's painting and writing and sometimes singing, but for other people, it could be cooking a meal or raising a child or running a business, whatever domain that we feel we're being creative in. But it's that intensity and the attention of our fire element that's really crucial for applying these alchemical ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
so Mars has a lot to do with that.
Okay. And the sun, the next one?
So the sun is related to consciousness, and in alchemy, it's related to the metal gold, which is the most noble and exalted metal of them all. And one of the goals of alchemy is to be able to transmute other metals like lead and tin into gold. And it's one of the ultimate goals of the alchemical work. And essentially, this is a higher state of consciousness that we realize within ourselves. And in Hermeticism, it's called gnosis. And I believe this is kind of the same thing as the philosopher's stone, this impenetrable, indestructible, true awareness of what we are and an awareness of our eternal divine nature. And so gold relates to that, and it relates to the sun, and the sun being that planetary sphere that transmits the light of the divine through its rays. And so it's through the sun that we have contact with that divine aspect of ourselves. So when we're talking about the sun, we're talking about the highest state of consciousness that we can attain within.
Okay, so in the book you talk about the eye of the sun. So is the eye of the sun like the eye of Horus?
Yes, yes. So the eye of Horus, the eye of Ra, within our own anatomy, we've got, our third eye, and this is where the sun and the moon are able to come and conjoin together, these polarities of our being, these opposites. And it's the same thing with the left and right eye of Ra, these different aspects of the one creator deity, and their unification being the way that we are able to not only perceive the different levels of reality, but to master reality and project our imaginations in the act of divine creation in the same way that Atum or the creator would have done.
Okay. And then next is Venus, because we always think about Venus as being the love planet, or female energy.
Yeah. Yes. Venus is typically the female energy planet and associated with the heart chakra, and our sense of compassion and love for ourselves and for others, and pleasure and our value systems, and the joy of creation, which is actually what I titled the chapter. So Venus really loves to beautify things. She loves aesthetic beauty and comfort and expression and freedom. And but Venus also has a dark side, and we see this expressed in Venus as a planet going through her synodic cycle, where she disappears for a time, which mythologically has been related to her journey through the underworld. And so I think Venus is really a beautiful planet to help us explore those underworld sides of ourselves, to go and meet with our darker sides. And she's also the light that beckons us out of the darkness, Venus, the morning star, pulling us out of the darkness of the night, and heralding the dawn. So Venus she's quite a dynamic planet, and that's how I present her in the book. And I have a deep appreciation for Venus. She's been a particularly active planet for me in my own process.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the book, though, under the Venus, you talk about the love of Aphrodite and Adonis. How is that connected with Venus?
Well, Venus also has to do with generation and with the regreening of the earth after the winter. So with the springtime and the sign of Taurus, which is her home sign. And so Adonis being representing like the death that's necessary before that regeneration. And Venus is that new life that's coming back, and the verdant growth as it's returning to the earth.
Okay. And then next, Mercury.
Yeah, Mercury Mercury is quite dynamic. Mercury relates to the throat chakra. So our
Mm-hmm.
self-expression and communication, our ability to listen and receive as well. And also our will. And yeah, so Mercury as a planet is quick moving and has to do with changeability and fluidity and quick-wittedness. And we think of like, you know, eloquent conversation and quick communication and messages being transmitted between the heavens and between Earth. But Mercury is also related to the Greek Hermes and to the
Mm-hmm.
Egyptian Thoth, and is a very important deity within the Hermetic system. And in fact, Hermeticism itself is named after Hermes. So this is the god of wisdom and of alchemy and magic. And it's said that Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, transmitted these ideas to humanity and is an aspect of the divine mind. So when we're working with Mercury, we need to remember that there's this kind of long history going back into ancient Egypt of the deity Thoth that relates to this archetype. And in essence, I think of Mercury in terms of the mind and the power of the mind to connect with all things. And this is a really important idea in Hermeticism, that all things are
Mm-hmm.
connected through a field of energy, and that through the divine mind, we can not only connect with things outside of ourselves, but we can influence things outside of ourselves as well through our imagination. So I think that's something that I talk about in the chapter in Mercury.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that you said through our imagination, because so many people think that, first of all, spirituality, you're learning about any of this has to be difficult. You have to go through, a 1,000-year process and, understand everything. And we tend as humans to forget about the imagination, thinking outside of our self-imposed boundaries. How important is it for us to do that?
I think it's crucial. I think the imagination is one of the most important faculties that we have. And I always like to reference Charles Baudelaire, who said that the imagination is the queen of all the faculties. And I completely agree, because I think that it not only connects us with all things, but it allows us to transmute and playfully create within this reality that we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we can open and liberate our imagination, the more potential we have to live, the life that we want to live, and to be free to create our life in the way that is going to help us to grow and evolve, and also to imagine the world in a way that we want it to be. And
Mm-hmm.
collectively, I think the more people that are able to refine and really work with their imagination, the more we'll be able to envision and create systems and, systems that are inclusive and
Mm-hmm.
holistic and beneficial for all
Yeah,
beings. Yeah.
bring great depth and knowledge. And then last but not least, the moon, one of
Mhm.
my favorites, being a moon child.
Yeah. Yes. So the moon relates to the third eye, and the moon is it's a reflective planet. It reflects the light of the sun. It doesn't transmit its own light. So everything through the moon is through reflection. And this relates to our unconscious, because we can't really directly see our unconscious, but through reflection and through these different methods, we can access it. And one of the main ways that we do that is through dreams. So I like to think about the moon in terms of the dream world, and in terms of things that are unseen and hidden, that take a little bit of effort to glimpse, and
Mhm.
and yeah, a little bit of self-reflection and going deeper. And there's also a darkness to the moon, the new moon or the dark moon.
Mhm.
And going into that darkness again is one of the necessary aspects of this kind of work and the spiritual work. And being willing to sit within uncomfortable places and Another
It's
thing,
almost, go
oh,
ahead.
I was
No,
just going
please.
to say, another thing about the moon and the third eye is that it has to do with how we project our imagination outward and the power of the third eye to do that. So
Hmm.
tapping, yes, tapping into the alignment of our energy. So they're rising up through the spinal column, rising up through the chakras. When things are all in alignment and balanced, then we can raise that energy up into the third eye, where the union between the sun and the moon takes place. And through this union, that's where our true creative power comes into play. And
Mhm.
we can imagine things the way that we would like them to be. And through our depth of emotion and feeling, we can also help to implant these like seeds into the unconscious. And it's through the lunar capacity that this is possible.
Hmm. Now, how important is it that one follow the phases of the moon as they are growing through their spiritual work?
I think it's a beautiful way to work with alchemy and to work with magic, to consider when the moon is waxing and when it's waning and its different phases is being optimal for different types of work. So
Mhm.
I think that's a great place to begin with any sort of magical endeavors. I think it's very important. And, the lunar sphere is the first sphere that we encounter as we're moving outward from the earth. So it's
Mhm.
sort of like the gateway to all the other spheres as well. So I think lunar magic is kind of very accessible and important to begin with.
Yeah, and I found, especially on the nights of the full moon, just going out and looking up at the moon and spreading my arms out and looking up and
Mhm.
like opening the chest to allow, communication, if you will,
Oh,
between my
yes.
heart chakra and the moon. And you walk away with such a wonderful, grounded feeling, and you would think, oh, the moon, maybe airy fairy, but no, not at all. Or at least it
Yeah.
wasn't for me.
Yeah. Did you get to do that with this last full moon in Gemini?
Doing it now, yes, yes. And it was interesting for me because my energy being a Cancer
Mhm.
with Leo rising and Capricorn moon and Gemini doesn't always mesh, but
Mhm.
it was interesting what it brought out for me to take a look at.
Yeah.
Things that I didn't want to really take a look at. Okay.
Mhm.
Not that I thought I was beyond it. It's just that I've been ignoring it for 67 years.
Oh,
So,
man.
so it's like, go away. But it's amazing how the energy allowed or forced, I should say, me to take a look at it. Now I could decide to, pick it up and move with it or let it go because we have free will. But it was
Mhm.
just interesting what new came into my psyche for me to sit with seriously.
Yes, yes, I feel that. I think with the Mars retrograde and Mars conjunct the moon, like I was feeling pretty like amped up and a little bit reactive in a way that I'm
Hmm.
not normally reactive. Um,
Hmm.
so that was interesting to note, just kind of very fiery. And it's settled down since the full moon passed. But yeah, those few days right around the full moon, I was just very amped up.
Yeah, it's like, well, what's going on here? But
Mhm.
I've learned at least to go with the flow and try
Yeah.
not to piss too many people off while I'm figuring out what I'm doing. Sometimes it works and sometimes not. Life
Yeah.
is always an experience for me, an experiment and experience for me.
Mhm.
Uh, um, but in your book, and this is really, I'd like some more clarification on this. In the book, you
Sure.
talk about the tormentors, the 12 tormentors, and the 10 powers. So
Oh,
first
yeah.
talk about the tormentors and how they truly torment us, and then the powers and how we can gain knowledge and power through paying attention to the 10 virtues.
Yeah. Well, the 12 tormentors are basically just vices that we all succumb to. So things like, I think they start off with ignorance, and then there's lust
Mhm.
and greed and envy and
Intemperance, let's
intemperance.
see, deceit, envy, treachery, um,
Treachery. Yeah.
anger,
And I think like desire for wealth or something like that might be one of them.
y-
Here, let me see if I can get to the book. But
rashness. Yes, on 129.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
So yeah, these are just essentially vices that we all have to deal with. And the fact that
Mm-hmm.
there are 12 may or may not relate to the 12 signs of the zodiac. In the Hermetica, there's no real correlation that matches them up with the signs, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially they are acting upon us through the zodiac or the sphere of the fixed stars. So yeah, so grief, intemperance, lust, injustice, anger, rashness, malice, these um, vices are sort of, if we're going about life unconsciously and we're not doing any work to sort of progress or overcome these things, then yeah, we're going to be subject to these vices, right? And
Mm-hmm.
some of them may affect us more at different points. But the idea is that we become aware of them, and then we can access the 10 powers to help us overcome those vices. And so the 10
Mm-hmm.
powers begin with knowledge of God and then move through joy, temperance, perseverance, justice, generosity, truth, and finally the good, the life, and the light. And the good, the life, and the light are also things, concepts that are applied to God or the source, um,
Mm-hmm.
referring to the purity of that source energy. And
Mm-hmm.
um, essentially, when we're looking at these 12 and the 10, it really comes down to the root of all vices, which is ignorance, and the root of all the powers, which is knowledge of God. So when we say knowledge of God, we also mean knowledge of self. And so in the Hermetic idea, Hermetic philosophy and theology, um, God exists within the mind and the soul of every human being. And so we get in
Mm-hmm.
touch with that ultimate divine source of energy within ourselves. And through that gnosis and that self knowledge of what we actually are, as co creators with the divine, then we can overcome these vices and also rise up through these planetary spheres into our highest, most exalted expression of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what does it mean to live a truly hermetic lifestyle? Explain what it is, and how can we begin to live that if that's our choice?
Well, I think some of the key components to a hermetic lifestyle would be moderation, for one,
Mm-hmm.
um, a life of that allows space and time for contemplation. I know we're all busy and we've got a lot going on, and a lot of people have families and jobs and things, but creating space for solitude and contemplation, I think, is really key. However, we can do that. And,
Mm-hmm.
a devotional approach to life and to reality and to our interactions with other people, and kind of being able to look at the bigger picture and see things in a holistic way, always holding within us this idea of correspondence, that um, as above so below, as within so without. So if
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing things we don't like, or we're feeling really reactive to something, like, rather than um, you know accepting that, okay, that's all external, that's not me, we look within ourselves, and we ask ourselves how those things exist within us, and then it helps us to have compassion and empathy for all of life. And a hermetic lifestyle is really one that looks at those interconnections between all things and the
Mm-hmm.
relationships between all things.
Do you think that we as a whole of society could ever get back to that type of lifestyle? I mean, if you look at what's going on, at least in the United States, with the political systems and all of the polarity and disparity and everything, do you think that we could ever get back to that type of lifestyle
Well, it's
as a whole?
interesting. Yeah, looking at things in that respect, it's everything is so polarized right now. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, when things are so extremely polarized, it seems like the natural um, progression from that would be for things to come to a balance. So to reach this extreme and then to come back to a place of balance, and then perhaps to go to another extreme, but this continual ebb and flow of energy. And we just happen to be at this one extreme um, point within that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that things will balance out. Um, we don't know what that will bring, but I do think that things will change. And I think it's very possible that people could move into a less polarized way of being, because we've observed how things have played out when things are so divided. And
Yeah.
it has not gone well.
No, but unfortunately, there's so many people that are stuck um, within that energy. And, what brings it to my mind is on the political stage in Georgia recently with the two black male politicians running for government. I mean, there was one that was so not equipped to even teach kindergarten, much less be a senator.
Mm.
And people backed it because it was because of a certain party, a certain tribe, if you will, as opposed to looking outside of the tribe and what's really good for people overall.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, for me, it's a little bit frightening that people have lost the ability to critically think.
Yes. And that they're so easily influenced and swayed
Yeah,
by.
by BS, bullshit, not the belief system. Well, I guess
Mhm.
it is their belief system, but it's a bullshit belief system, in my opinion, folks. So don't send me hate
Yeah.
mail. Okay. You do you think that you have to be, if you wanted to be initiated into the Hermetic life, can it be self-initiation, or do you have to go someplace and study with a master?
I think that the Hermetic path really is about self-initiation. I think
Hmm.
people have worked in groups, and there's all kinds of different organizations you can go to for Hermetic um, initiation and training and whatnot. But when we're talking about Hermetic, the word itself implies solitary. And
Mm.
a lot of the initiation that happens is happening within, um, through contemplation, through reading these Hermetic writings and teachings, through reflection and through personal experience. And someone else, could guide you through that potentially, but I don't think it's ever a good idea to put our um, spiritual well-being and sense of progress and truth into someone else's hands,
Thank
and
you, thank you, thank you.
yeah, yeah.
And the reason why I say that, way back when I first came to California, a zillion years ago, I took a course from a well-known intuitive in the area, not because so much I wanted the information from the course, but I wanted to learn how to teach a class.
Hmm.
Okay. And went to this person, and initially, things were good, and I could, ascertain how to, set up, structure a class and all of that. And then the information and the hate that was spewed from this person, I was like, oh my God, how can you even consider yourself to, be
Oh,
spiritual at all? So taught me good lessons. I got my
yes,
money's worth. But be careful with who you entrust your soul to, and just because they say it doesn't mean it's true.
very true. Yes. And, sometimes people teach by example, and that can be good or bad.
Hmm. No, it's great because I mean, just like looking at the shadow and the light, it's important to look at, the darkness and the light of teaching and learning,
Hmm.
and where you want to be. Now, my last question before I ask about your website, and I can't say this guy's last name, Hermes. It starts with Pris. How do you say that?
Trismegistus.
There you go.
Yeah.
How does his BS, his belief system, factor into your life and your relationship?
Oh, well,
If
Hermes being
at
the
all.
eponymous founder of the Hermetic teachings plays a huge role in my spiritual practice, and I feel like I invoke Hermes more than any other deity or god, and um, also, find it of crucial importance to continually work with the throat chakra related to Mercury and Thoth and Hermes, and to open that up and allow it to be free to express what it wants to express. So,
Mhm.
calling upon Hermes, working with Mercury as a planet, these are very important in my own personal practice. As a
Mhm.
writer and as a creator of images, we think of Thoth and Hermes in terms of the mind, but also in terms of the magic of illusion or the creation of images and the use of the imagination, and also the power of the word and of thought. So continually refining and purifying both my internal thinking and also the way that I express myself. And working with Hermes is how I accomplish that.
Okay, great. Now, when we go to your website, Marlene Seven Bremner, and it's Marlene. Remember that, folks. What are we going to find there?
Well, you'll find information about the book and how you can order it. You'll also find a preview of my upcoming book, which is being released in July of 2023. And that one follows on the heels of the first book, but it goes a little deeper into art and alchemy. So it's called The Hermetic Marriage of Art and Alchemy. And you can pre-order it. There's a link on the website. And you'll also find a gallery of my paintings and prints for sale of all of my work, or most of it anyway. And other resources as well. I think I've got a blog, which I have not updated in forever. And links to my Patreon. I've got a Patreon that you could subscribe to with various tiers with different rewards. And yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, have your publicist send me a copy of the book. We'll have you on for your next book that's coming out. Our time is over, and I really appreciate you and your energy today. What pearl of wisdom would you like to leave with the audience today?
I would say to trust in your imagination and to give it time to daydream and to be free, and see where that leads you.
Great. Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you for being with me today, and the audience, thank you for being with us. I truly honor and appreciate everybody's time and attention. And remember that the most important choice that you can make is what you choose to make important. Consider making the ethical choice of discovering Hermetic philosophy and creative alchemy. Abundant blessings, light and love to all. Agape.